Hi, in this video we're going to cover the definitions of various terms that we use a lot with the Promo Planner. Now these terms are not just relevant to the Promo Planner, but are relevant to sales response modeling in general. Now one of the great advantages of using the Promo Planner is its consistency of approach. And to maintain this consistency, it makes sense that we planners ensure that we have a common understanding of all the terms it uses. So we're going to explore these definitions in some detail so we can all share a common language when we're planning. The first term we're going to explore is time horizon. For any planning project, there must be a time horizon. This is the period of time for which the plan we are making is to be associated with. The precise definition of a time horizon will vary between different sales response approaches, but with the Promo Planner we're very clear. The time horizon is always 8 consecutive years. Now the Promo Planner time horizon starts with the history year. In most cases this will be last year. I'm speaking to you in 2019, so the history year in my case is 2018. The history year doesn't have to be last year. There's nothing in the Promo Planner that forces the history year to be last year. But in most cases, if you are creating a plan for next year, then it follows that the history year will be last year. So the history year is required for 2 reasons. Firstly, it anchors our plan in reality. We should know the actual financial figures for last year. We should know the sales we achieved and the investments we made to achieve them. There should be no dispute about them. So ensuring our plan time horizon starts with a known set of data is a great place to start. And secondly, the history year is required as the basis for the carryover calculations. We need to understand the total sales of last year to help us assess the carryover for this year. So that's the history year, and it will always be the first year of the 8-year Promo Planner time horizon. Now the next 3 years, which must be consecutive to the history year, are referred to as the optimization years. If you are running a strategic level plan, then you will automatically get a result for each of these 3 optimization years. If you are planning or running an operational or tactical level plan, then it's a little different. You will get a result for any one of these optimization years. Or if you prefer, you can create a weighted average across all the 3 years, a blend if you like. Now you can define how you want the 3 optimization years to blend into a single optimization year using the optimization weighting option on the Promo Planner basic settings screen. Being able to blend the years can be very useful in certain situations. Now, it's important to remember that the optimization weighting option you see here has no impact on a strategic level plan. Strategic level plans always give you a recommendation for each of the 3 years individually. Lastly, we have the remaining 4 consecutive years. These are here to give the Promo Planner a longer term view of the expected financial direction of your organization, of the brands that make up your portfolio. They are also used to calculate the long-term assessments, which brings me very nicely onto the definition of long-term. So as you can see from the graphic, the Promo Planner is a forward-looking tool. We use it to plan for the future, not to analyze the past. Now to reach an optimal investment recommendation for any one year, the Promo Planner looks at the data 4 years ahead. So using my example, to calculate the optimal investment for 2019, the Promo Planner will look at the data for the period 2019 all the way through to 2023, making 5 years in all. And to calculate a result for 2021, the Promo Planner will look at the period 2021 through to 2025. So in Promo Planner terms, long term means 5 years, or to be even more precise, it's the year of investment plus 4 years of carryover. Now, I've mentioned the word carryover a couple of times now, so I guess we should define that next. Now, if you haven't already seen the video in this section, which covers carryover in some detail, I urge you to watch it. This here is a quick summary. The term carryover refers to that part of last year's total sales that we assess would carry over into this year if we did not promote via any channel in this current year. This is an assessment. There is no formula that can calculate it for you. Although the Promo Planner does have a very sophisticated approach to making this assessment for you. Now, the Promo Planner produces a carryover assessment for each brand for each future year based only upon the input data that you have supplied. So carryover is always expressed as a percentage. It is this assessed portion of carryover sales this year divided by the total sales of last year. So in my example here, that would be 80 divided by 100, which gives us, of course, 80%. Now, once we have assessed the carryover portion of sales, the remaining sales, the difference between the carryover sales and this year's total sales forecast, if you like, is referred to as the incremental sales. In my example, the total sales forecast for this year is 120. So, subtracting the 80 of carryover sales will give us 40. So in our case, we have incremental sales of 40. Now, this gives me the opportunity to talk about short term. We've already defined long term as 5 years for the Promo Planner. Short term is just 1 year in Promo Planner terms. More precisely, as we know, long term should be defined as the year of investment plus 4 years of carryover, giving us 5 years in total. Short term refers to just 1 year, and that year is the year we make our investment. So using my example, we have short-term incremental sales of 40. So let's move on now to defining short-term profit. So looking at my example here, our total sales forecast of 120 has been split into carryover and incremental sales portions. Without any promotion, we would expect sales this year to be about 80. That's the carryover from last year. But with promotion, we are predicting our sales in total to be 120, giving us the 40 of incremental sales. But how much did we invest in the promotional activity to achieve this 40 result? In my example here, we invested 50. So our promotional investment of 50 has delivered a return of just 40 in the year of investment. We have made a short-term profit of -10, which is of course a short-term loss. Now, it's quite common that we do not get a profitable return on the promotional investments we make in the same year that the investments are spent. This is particularly true when we are launching a new product. What we need to spend on promotion in the first year could be significantly greater than the total sales we are forecasting to earn. However, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't make the investment. It just means we should measure the return of our investment over a longer period, not just a single year. So this is exactly why the Promo Planner measures the return of any of our promotional investments over 5 years, over the long term, if you like. So instead of looking at the short-term return of our promotional investments, we need to look at the long term, particularly when launching new products. Now, in my example here, the 40 of incremental sales we achieved in 2019, our year of investment, is also subject to carryover in the next years. So in 2020, the Promo Planner is assessing 32 of carryover sales from the 40 in 2019. The Promo Planner is also assessing a carryover in 2021 of 26 from the 32 we achieved in 2020. Now this process continues for 4 years. So we are looking here at the cumulative impact of carryover on the initial incremental sales of 40, which the 50 we invested in 2019 has produced. So if we take the initial 40 of incremental sales and add to it the cumulative impact of carryover for the next 4 years, we get a total of 136. That's 136 of long-term incremental sales from our initial investment of 50. This is where we get the precise definition for long-term as the year of investment plus 4 years of carryover. Now, we spent 50 in 2019 and earned back just 40 in that same year, so we made a loss of 10 in the short term. But over the long term, we have a profit of 136 minus our 50. So the long-term gross profit is 86. Now I've introduced here the term gross. When you hear the term gross in any Promo Planner analysis, it simply means that the impact of your cost of goods has not been included in the calculation. So now I need to define what we mean by cost of goods. Now the cost of goods, or COGS if you like, is a highly confidential number. It may be the case that your finance department will be reluctant to release the cost of goods data to you. We will need it, however, to accurately measure your profitability. This is why, in the Promo Planner tool, it is possible to restrict visualization of the cost of goods if this is required by the finance department in your organization. For some projects, finance themselves may enter this COGS data and then restrict its visualization with a password in the Promo Planner tool. If you have authorization to view the COGS, then you don't need to set this password. The choice is yours. But don't lose the password if you do set it, because we at MDEX have no way to recover it. So let me define cost of goods for you. This is the cost to your organization of getting the brand you are selling to the appropriate distribution channel, expressed as a percentage of your selling price. Generally speaking, we include the brand acquisition costs and any distribution costs or local taxes when we are calculating our cost of goods. In my example here, the cost of making or purchasing the brand is 12, and I have a distribution cost of 3, bringing my total cost of goods to 15. So if I express this 15 as a percentage of my selling price, I get 15 divided by 100, which is of course 15%. So the cost of goods in this case is 15%. I should mention here that if you are in a situation where you are promoting a brand on behalf of another company, or in a co-promotion situation perhaps where two companies are promoting the same brand, it's important that the cost of goods you enter into the promo planner reflects your co-promotion agreement. So any royalties agreed between the parties should be reflected in the cost of goods. Now, it's very common to use the same cost of goods percentage in all years of the time horizon for a typical promo planner project. But we asked you to consider the impact on cost of goods if you are expecting any selling price changes in the future. Generally speaking, the production and distribution costs of any brand are relatively stable, but the selling price can vary significantly. So if you have included in your sales forecasting for your brand a price decrease, say in the next few years, then this price decrease will have the effect of raising the cost of goods percentage. In my example, if the 15 cost of goods stays the same, but my selling price reduces to say 80, then my cost of goods percentage is now 15 divided by 80, which is 18.75%. So my cost of goods percentage has increased due to the fall in my selling price. The opposite would be true if your selling price rises. The cost percentage will likely fall. So it's important that when you enter your cost of goods for future years into the promo planner, you consider this possible impact on the cost of goods. If you are lucky, your finance department will have done this for you already, but if they have not, you may need to do this yourself. So that's the cost of goods. How do we use it? Well, we use it to calculate net profit and net return on investment. Whenever you hear the term net in a promo planner context, it means that the effect of the cost of goods has been taken into consideration. So if we look at my example now, the 15% cost of goods works out as 20.4 when we apply it to the 136 of long-term gross incremental sales. If we then subtract this 20.4 from our 136, we get 115.6, which is our long-term net incremental sales. To calculate our long-term net profit, we take this 115.6 and subtract our initial investment of 50 that we made back in 2019. This gives us a long-term net profit of 65.6. And finally, to calculate our net long-term return on investment, we divide the long-term net incremental sales of 115.6 by the initial investment of 50. And this time we get a percentage of just over 231%. Now, whenever you see an ROI calculation in the promo planner, it is always a net ROI figure. The ROI always includes the effect of cost of goods when we show it on our reports. So that's it. We've defined all the common terms we use throughout a promo planner study, and in the process showed you how we calculate the long-term net profit and ROI. This is a great time to remind you all that the promo planner is an optimizer. It optimizes the long-term net profit for the whole portfolio that is being studied. So understanding how the long-term net profit is calculated is key to understanding what the promo planner does. Thank you very much.